It's the 19th of March, 2015. We are in Sun City West, Arizona on a beautiful spring day. Had a rain shower this morning. We're here at the home of my parents, Jim and Sandra Tindell. Mom is at choir rehearsal now, so we're going to take this opportunity to talk to Dad, who is right here. And he's got his trusty little canine friend, Bobby. Hi, Bobby. There she is. You can hear the quail. And so I wanted to ask you about your life. You turned 80 years old in February.
February 3rd.
Mm-hmm. How does it feel to be 80?
You can feel it, but not too badly.
Yeah.
You know, certain parts of the body start to slow down a little bit, and but there's everything. I can't complain.
Yeah. Born and raised in Wisconsin, huh?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And part of a large family, large by today's standards.
Yes.
Probably average size by those days.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me about your dad.
My dad was a man of short stature and only went like to 6th grade, but he worked all of his life to support the family, did various jobs. And he did run an insulation business where you put insulation in homes in the walls and stuff to protect it. So I remember working with him, and we had, at that time, you put it in the truck and then it blew it through a hose right into the walls. And he held a lot of various different type jobs down, but he was a hard worker. Mm-hmm. Never made a lot of money, but we had a good life. Big
fisherman too, right?
Big fisherman. Mm-hmm. My dad loved to fish and spent a lot of time fishing with him. He had a trailer down by the Mississippi, and we'd go down there and sit out set lines, and that was his pastime. That and hunting. We used to go hunting too a lot.
He was born, if I remember, in 1902, mm-hmm. the year before the Wright brothers flew the first airplane. But he never flew in a plane in his life, did he?
Not that I know of, no, never did. I wanted him to. Mm-hmm. I was going to take him out where you could get a ride in one of those small planes, but he said he'd just rather not do it. So.
But I remember when the first ship that went to land on the moon came through on a traveling exhibition in Madison, and we went there to see it. It's probably 1970 or so.
Right.
He got to see that spaceship, right?
Yeah, I remember that too. Yeah, I was surprised how small it was.
Yeah.
I think that 3 people had to lay in there and orbit around. But and now I see just the other day on television where this guy's going up. He's by himself, and he's going to be up there for a whole year.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man, I don't know how he'd stand it.
Yeah.
You better not want to take a walk at night, I'll tell you that.
And your mother was a woman of her age too, right?
Yeah, and she was came from the background, Speth background in German, and she worked hard all her life. She not only raised a family, but she worked in the factories in Dubuque, Iowa, and I can never remember my mother when she wasn't working. Hold down her job, even though it didn't make that much money, but made enough to live on. I guess that's all that's necessary.
What was it like growing up in small town Wisconsin in the 1940s?
Well, you pretty much, of course, you don't have what you got now, so like television and everything else, so you pretty much made your own entertainment. You know, and be outside and going with other kids. I did, and sleigh riding and doing everything, that particular thing, and in sports and my folks. So if you spend your time, like I said, fishing or hunting or spending time off, or visiting, just didn't have the other things like computers and everything else and cell phones that people have now. We spend more time on that than they do visiting with other people. So it wasn't too bad. But if you don't have something, you never miss it.
Mm-hmm. And you had a lot of friends, I'm sure, and of course a big family. One brother, right?
One brother and 4 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother was the oldest, and then next was Joanne, my sister, who passed away when she was about 50 years old. And then my sister Alice, who's still living at about 84, and then my sister Florence, who's about a year and a half older than me, and then my youngest sister Patsy, who's going through some physical, mental problems right now as far as turning older.
Dogs have always been a part of your life too, haven't they?
Always been a part. We've always had dogs. We had, when I was a youngster, we had them for, of course, hunting dogs and stuff, and we've always had a dog in the family. We've had, this is the fourth or fifth dog we've had since we've been down here in 30 years, and we wasn't going to get another one after we had to put the other one down a year ago, but that doesn't last long. You have to get another dog.
Tell me the story about how you got Bowser.
Bowser. Well, just a minute, put her down. I got Bowser that I had I believe that was one where I went to the fair, and I was at the fair, and I was always really good with throwing darts at stuff and everything else, and so where you throw it, they had like playing cards on the wall, and you had to get like 4 of a kind. Well, I threw all 4 darts right in one ace. And so then I won this little dog and brought her home, and my folks always accepted it. No problem with that. And it was quite a dog, but good hunting dog. We had a great time with Bowser. So
He lived a long time, didn't he?
lived a long time, yeah. He really did. And a lot longer than some of them live right now.
Yeah.
But we enjoyed them. So we've always had dogs since I was a little kid.
You went into high school, and you were only, what, 13 and a half years old when you entered high school?
Probably so, yeah. It was because I graduated and I was only 16. I just turned 17 in February and I graduated that thing. So that's probably about right, which is in a way too young. It would have been better if I'd have been a couple years older and stuff for everything.
Yeah.
Sports and studies and everything else.
And yet, for sports, you were at Platteville High School, won 4 letters, varsity letters every year for all 4 years, right?
Yeah, and all the activities.
So as you lettered in varsity football as a 13-year-old.
Yes. And then I played baseball, and I pitched no-hitter in baseball, and I was in track, and I went to the state with a shot put in the discus through that, and I was in basketball, and at that time I set the single scoring record game, 30 points, which is nothing nowadays, but then it was quite a few points. It's not like a dunk ball today that they have. So, yeah, I was active in sports.
And so after you got out of high school, then you went to college, and were you not the first one in your family to go to college?
Yes, I was the first one to go to college, but basically, again, I was pretty young, and so, but I went, and it just didn't work out too well. I mean, I had classes I liked and things, but I just didn't feel it was for me, so I needed to get out and go to work for a while, so I left and then worked a little bit more and ended up going to the military.
And it was the Army?
I was in the Army 3 years, stationed in, I was in radio repair. Went to school to learn how to repair radios. They sent me to Europe, and I played baseball in Europe for 2.5 years with the Army teams, traveled around, and never did repair a radio.
But you were over there in Germany, and in those days, of course, that was way before the wall came down, so you'd go on alert every now and then, wouldn't you? Just
Yep,
in the event the Russians were coming.
That's right. You'd have to go on alert and take off with the trucks out on the Autobahn, and just like it was you being invaded, so it kept you on alert. But met a lot of nice people in the Army, and a lot of various professional. In fact, I played basketball, and Walter Dukes was on one of the teams I played against, and I guarded him, and he's 6'11", and I was 6'2", so. But it was fun.
And so then, by then, of course, you had met the woman that you would marry. Tell me how you met my mother.
Boy, I met her, they moved from a little town of Palmyra, Wisconsin to Platteville, and I wasn't in school then, I was out of high school, And my sister, Pat, was in school in the same class, and I remember it was kind of funny because she came home one day, that night we were eating supper, and she mentioned about this new girl that just came into the high school, and she said, boy, she really thinks she's something. She wears these real tight sweaters and all that. And I said, hey, I'd like to meet her. And I did meet her, and from then on, that was it. Never got married when we were really young.
And that was just before you shipped out to Germany, wasn't it?
Right. I went to training down in Fort Gordon, Georgia, for radio repair school, and then came back, and I was going to be sent to Germany. So Sandra and I got married. I flew into Madison, Wisconsin, coming home from Fort Gordon, and it was on a Friday. The folks picked me up, and the next night, afternoon, I was standing in front of the minister getting married. And then Sandra and I, our honeymoon was we drove to Dubuque, Iowa, which is about 20 miles away, and we rented a motel room for the night and came back, and I left and never saw her again for 7 months.
And then, of course, you had the time together over in Germany, and for two young people from Wisconsin, and you didn't know the language, that had to be quite challenging.
It was quite a challenge because you're right, didn't speak any of the language, but through what little words you could use plus sign language. And we lived with a German couple in their upstairs apartment way up on the top floor, about 4 flights high. We rented a couple of rooms from them, and then I drove out to the base and in Karlsruhe, Germany is where we were at. Drove out to the base and operated a radio relay station while we weren't playing ball, and then we traveled around and played ball. And Sandra, I was like 19 and Sandra a little over 17, so that's quite young. And I'd never been any place at all. I mean, much out of Platteville. So it was quite an experience to be flying over to Europe and living over there.
And you played a lot of baseball, and you got noticed by some scouts, huh?
Yeah, I played baseball. Our team we had a good team. We had some pros on it and stuff. And then I pitched, and I was a pitcher, and I remember one game I was pitching, and I didn't know it, but there was a scout there from the Baltimore Orioles, and after the game he contacted me and talked to me, and I got an offer from them. I was going to get out of the Army after a 3-year enlistment because I figured, well, I wanted to go back to college and get my college degree. And he sent me a letter and wanted me to sign a contract with Baltimore and come to spring training. But when I got back, at that time, if you were an amateur and if you had any connection with professional, like I would have, then you're not allowed to play amateur sports. So if I would have signed a contract, gone there and not played and came back, I couldn't play in college. But nowadays it's different, of course. And so, but our son David was born over there in Germany just a few weeks before we left to come back to the United States. So that was quite an adventure as well. And I just didn't feel like coming back here and leaving young wife and a 2 or 3 month old baby and taking off someplace for professional sports. So then I got another letter from them, and they said, well, just come to see what spring training without signing a contract, and then see what kind of offer they made me, and I could decide then. But I just decided not to do it. And that was a smart thing to do.
The years later, though, when you would watch the pros play, especially the Orioles, did you ever think that, that could have been me out there on the mound?
No, I've thought that a few times, yes. Because it's a whole different ballgame as you move up the line about players, because they're really good.
Yeah.
They make it look easy, but it's not easy. Well, I've thought that a few times, but I just moved on. I played ball in college. I pitched in college and won some games, and then played with a city team and got around. It was fun. Once you make a decision on something, you made it. That's it.
And you majored in industrial arts, is that right?
I majored in industrial arts. I went up to Menominee at Stout, which is a branch of the University of Wisconsin at Menominee, and I was there. I went during the summer while I was teaching in Whitewater, and I got my degree in industrial education, a bachelor's degree, and then I worked and I got a master's degree. and took some courses at the University of Wisconsin, got a master's degree, and then also have taken probably maybe 20 hours beyond the master's degree, and thinking that when I went to college, if I had to pick someone out that was get their master's and beyond, it wouldn't have been me, because I was just thankful to get through college, but I did it, and I'm proud that I did do it.
You started out teaching, and you taught what, industrial arts? Is that
I taught
right?
industrial arts, and I went into student teaching at Platteville High School, and then since I had a degree in that, I ended up getting a job in industrial arts and teaching, and went up to I can't even think where I was at
It was Whitewater first, right?
Whitewater. Yeah, I went to Whitewater and taught in the junior high school. Taught there for a couple of years, and then that's when I was going up during the summer to go to get my master's degree. And Whitewater, it was nice, but then decided, well, maybe I wanted to move into administration, so I got an opportunity to go over. Well, from there I moved up to St. Francis. They had been opening a brand new school, and I knew the principal and superintendent because they were from our hometown, so they gave me an opportunity to move up there in a brand new school and start up the whole industrial arts system, so I did that. And then I was there a year or two, and then we moved way over to Mount Sterling, which is way on the other side, east side of Wisconsin. We lived in a little bitty town that had one stop sign, I think. And I was a high school principal at a small high school there. And then from there on, I just moved up until I ended up getting back down I went to, I'm trying to think of the name now, outside of Madison. Cambridge, yeah, I'm forgetting. And I got a high school job there, and then moved on down and ended up at the end of getting a superintendent at Potosi, Wisconsin, small school right outside of Platteville. And so I spent that time, I actually spent more time in administration than actually teaching. And I was there for about 8 or 9 years. Decided I wanted to move to Arizona where it was a little warmer. I'd come down here, and Sandra, aunt and uncle lived here, or aunt did, and I came down here, stayed a little bit, and I liked it, so decided I wanted to move down here. And so came down. I really wasn't interested in staying in education. I'd been in it quite a while. So I came down, interviewed at a couple other jobs, but I guess you go back to what you can do. I ended up at Paradise Valley School, it's a K-12 district with about probably 8,000 students. I was director of purchasing there, a big district who grew up to about 13,000. And I was there for 13 years, and I retired, so I spent 37 years in education.
What did you like about being an administrator?
Well, I like the opportunity that you had a chance to help guide people through things and set up plans and things of this sort. And I never really did fall in love with teaching. I just felt that when you supervise teachers and stuff, I'm sure in my mind I was a good teacher, but basically I felt that my strength was not in that, it was in administration, so I enjoyed that.
And you had 3 sons.
3 sons, David, Alan, and Brian. And when we came down to Arizona to live, we moved down. David was on his own and off, and Brian and Alan came down with us, and Alan was married. He was going to go to graduate school at ASU, and Brian also got in at ASU. Then Alan got his degree and the master's degree and left and went back to the state of Washington, and Brian stayed there with us, and he got his bachelor's and master's degree, and he ended up teaching at a Phoenix Union High School, which is a big high school district in Phoenix, and he's been there 20-some years. He's still teaching there. And he married a Filipino gal, really nice gal, and they have a son and a daughter. And I can remember Irene coming up, and I just happened to find the letter I got from the Baltimore Orioles, and I put it in a frame and hung it on my wall in my computer room, and Irene and them were always thinking about, you know, what you can do. They were go-getters to get ahead. And so I said, what do you think of that letter, Irene? And I remember she read it and her eyes got bigger. And when she got done, she said, gee, Dad, you could have been somebody. And I said, you mean I'm nothing? Oh, I don't mean that. I know she was thinking big money in baseball. See, actually, when I graduated and went teaching, I made less than I would have what they offered me to play baseball. I said, but it's a whole different ball game. So,
Yeah.
And then Alan had left. I said, I'm going back to Washington. So Brian, we've lived in Arizona since 1984.
Have you ever thought about how it was that your family that you were born into, your father never even went to high school,
Yeah.
and then here you are, and your kids and your grandchildren now, and all of the cumulative college degrees that
Right.
our family has accumulated? That's really quite a leap, don't you think?
It really is quite a leap, because you look at the background. Like I said, my dad only went to 6th grade, and I think my mother graduated in high school. And my brother Ernest, I don't think he ever graduated. He went into the military when he was 17 to India. And my other sisters graduated from high school, and that was it. And so to think that in our immediate family, right, I mean, myself and Sandra, she's got a degree. She went back to college after we were all working and ended up getting a bachelor's degree. And David, he got a bachelor's degree, and Alan's got a master's and a doctorate degree, and Brian's got a master's degree. And now I look at the grandchildren, where they all are in college or graduated from college. I mean, that's we just take it for granted that you're going to be in college, you know, or go through and make good use of your career. But, you know, that's no reflection on my folks whatsoever, but basically my dad never had the opportunities we have today.
But he laid the foundation.
He did. He laid the foundation. I respect my folks a lot.
What do you remember about your grandparents, your dad's parents?
I remember my dad's parents used to go over to their house and visit a lot, and I can remember them, you know, of course I was very respectful of him because he was a lot older, of course, and I was younger, but I remember that you know, he used to sit, he had dropsy, which is a disease of some sort with the legs, and I can remember, one thing I remember, I used to sit, when he sat and eat, he'd take his bread and put it in the saucer and pour stuff over top of it, like coffee or milk, and eat them there. But they were, he died, I think, when he was 83, 81, and he just respected people in those days. I don't know, it seems different today, but I remember them, and I remember my grandmother on my mother's side. I never saw my grandfather. She lived with us for a while. My grandmother did, German, and my mother and her used to speak German in the house. So, but you know, I didn't get too much involved in anything. You don't have any money, you aren't going to go out and buy a lot of stuff. You just figure, well, that's the way life is.
Do you remember the first car you ever had?
First car I ever had, my brother Ernest had a 1935 Ford, and Ernest was he was kind of a great guy, but he was kind of a ne'er-do-well as far as the women, and he had this car, and you know, one of us lived in Richmond Center or something. So then my dad, I had a paper route when I was in high school, and I rode my bike. I walked, and then my dad told me one time after class, he said, "Come on with me." So we went down to the Montgomery Ward store, and he bought me a bicycle to ride. And I said, and I remember saying, "Oh, you didn't have to do that, Dad. I mean, I can," because I knew he didn't have much money, and I can walk. I have no problem doing that at all. And he said, "No, I want you to have it." So I really enjoyed that. And then when I was getting to be a senior in high school, all at once he shows up, and here's him with my brother's 1935 Ford car, and he said, "I bought this from Ernest for you." I could hardly believe it. What? You bought a car for me? And of course then Ernest was at home, and then had come back to stay in. I remember I wanted to borrow my car once, and I never saw it for 6 months. I already had to go after him to get my car back, but that was my first car I ever had, 1935 Ford. And I knew my dad couldn't afford those. He was putting on wasn't a lot of money, but it was when he was not making very much. But, yeah, I enjoyed it, but.
What do you think, lessons that you might have learned, even if you didn't really think about it at the time, from your folks, from your grandparents, that carried over into your life, that helped to guide you?
Well, I think that being respectful of people, especially your peers, I know it's hard to be respectful of some people because of the way they act, but you still gotta figure that, you know, they're your adults, and one thing I learned is that you have to work hard. You know, you gotta do the best job you can do, no matter what it is, and try to move on the best you can. And my folks, they both worked, and we came home, and we'd walk home from high school at noon and fix ourselves a little lunch and then walk back from school. And that's how we did it. My folks were gone working, and we understood that. We didn't be too concerned about that. We didn't take very many trips, but we were respectful in our family. And my father, even though he's very small in stature, I can remember him telling my brother got a little angry with my mother and said something, and my dad put him right in his spot. He said, "You don't talk like that around our house." And that's the way my dad was. And so I agreed with him 100%. And my mother was more the disciplinarian than my dad was, because my mother came from a German background, and my mother would, I remember one time if I was going to a friend's house to stay a little bit and I didn't get home at a certain time, and get a telephone call wondering why I wasn't coming home. So anyway, one time something happened where I got home and she was upset, and she took the strap and gave me a whipping on the legs and the butt for not being there. And then when she later found out I was telling the truth, I never even knew about it, see? And then she said, "Well, that's just for your next time, man." It's one up on you. But otherwise, I never had any problems with my folks at all. They were.
When you go back to Platteville, the house that you grew up in is now next door to the one that they lived in.
That's right.
After the kids had gone,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What do you think about when you see those houses or see those pictures? The memories start coming back?
It does, and I can remember we lived in the one house right on the corner. We didn't have any inside plumbing. Mm-hmm. We had a water faucet out in the yard that you pressed the pressure and got the water in. We didn't have any toilet facilities. We had a shed out in back, and we had an outside toilet, and we were right in town. And then right next to where we had the restroom, there was a big drop off and a big bank down in there, and we used to just throw our garbage out. I mean, it is dumb, but we used it as a dump. And that's eventually where my dad cleaned everything up and built another house down there. But he tried, and he ended up put a little room in our kitchen and made a restroom out of it and put water in the house and things of the sort. That was a big going and stuff, I remember one time I had some friends from school come down. I didn't have too many friends in school, but I had come, and there's a couple girls, and trying to impress people. And one girl asked me, she said, "I have to use the restroom, where is it?" And I wouldn't tell her, because I didn't want to see, you got to go out back in that shed. And then I said, "Well, we don't have a restroom." And she said, "Well, you must have a restroom." I can remember that to this day, and I was only like 15. And I just felt so bad to have to say, "Well, you got to go out there and use an outside toilet," That's the way it was.
That was kind of the end of that with that girl then, huh?
That's right. I had to worry about that after that. But, we got by on there and lived there. And then my dad, in order to take in some extra money, because he didn't have much, he walled off between the living room and the dining room and the one bedroom on the side, and we rented that out. And there was a young couple from down south, Missouri or something, and they rented it. And they came there and lived on that side, and we lived on the other side. And I remember that they were very nice. We'd get together and play card games and everything else like that. But my dad figured it was a chance to pick up a little extra money. And
that was not a very big house to begin with.
No, it's not. Not very good. It had downstairs, had 2 bedrooms upstairs, and they had a downstairs with a 1 bedroom, a small little living room, small little dining room, and a kitchen. That was it.
you ever think about living as we do today? And granted, of course, there are some people who don't, but you have a house like this, and you have plumbing and so forth that you take for granted, and you have a television that can pick up TV from all over the world, and a computer that will do everything, you know. Do you ever think about what your dad might have thought of if he could see all of this?
Well, you would have thought whoever lives here must be very, very rich. And the thing is that, you know, I'm sure he'd never seen anything like that at all, you know. And, well, you know, you used to think that if you, Belmont, Wisconsin, about 7 miles to the east of us, and I remember they had a big tornado there, and people said, well, they have a tornado in Belmont, and they said, well, where's Belmont? You know, and you just pointed that way, because you don't even get 7 miles away from your house hardly, you see. Nowadays, people are traveling all over the world. And, of course, you got money to do it now. You didn't have money to do it then.
And you've had the chance to travel a lot, too, haven't you?
I've been to Cuba 3 times. I've been to Singapore twice. Been to India twice. I've been to Mexico a number of times. I've been to Brazil. I've been, and then those are just on church doings. And then I've been over Europe and cruises over there and all different places I never believed in a million years I'd ever get to. Never even entered my mind. Somebody thought, you know, someday, Jim, you'll be traveling to all those places. I would have said, you're nuts. I'm going to those places. But
when you went to, I know you went to Israel.
Yeah.
And walked in the path of Jesus.
Right.
That must have been something.
That was really something. I mean, when you think about that and think what, you try to visualize the way it was in those days, because he lived there and outside and didn't have a very big place or anything, and what they had to do is walk every place they went, and you know, and so to travel any particular distance, and then we'd stop at one place where he'd been, you just think, you know, Jesus actually walked there. Kind of boggles your mind, you know, to look back and think those types of things. I never thought in a million years of course, when I read about Jesus and studied a little bit beforehand, you formulate in your mind a little bit the way things should look, and you find out it's entirely different when you get there. But you realize how small it is compared to over here. But yeah, it's, you think, boy, just when I sat there and thought that Jesus, the disciples sat there and Jesus was standing there talking to them, it's hard to believe, you know, in that amount of time.
Faith has played a large part in your life, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. You know, I never, we always, well, didn't go to, we were Lutherans, Germans, but go to church for a wedding or something, and I went to catechism every Saturday, and, you know, just studied through the Bible and through that, but otherwise there was never any big thing on going to church. But then when I got married, we went all the time. Sandra was much more acclimated to going to church than I was, and I went, and I remember I was superintendent in Potosi, Wisconsin, and I'd been at church boards and things of this sort, and you see how some people, you know, I guess I just wasn't looking at it. First of all, thinking about Jesus as being perfect, and you think, I'll never be that. I can't possibly be that, you know. I just didn't function that well. I remember sitting down in my office, and I wrote a letter to a pastor out of California at the Ivory Church, or where it was, a big mega church out there, and I laid out things. I said, I just so confused. I don't know what the, you know, you hear this, you hear that, and I try to do this, and yet you start thinking bad thoughts, and you think, no, I shouldn't be doing that. Why am I doing that? And if there's anything that you could help me out on, I'd certainly appreciate it. And I got back a letter, and I thought, well, I hope this is interesting, and I opened it, and it was just a form thing, and they thanked me for writing them and everything, and they sent me a little plastic cross. I had it for years, and I finally threw it away, and then they sent me a request for money. And I thought, and that really helped. I thought, sure, typical, you know, you ask, well, can you answer a few questions for me, a little bit of guidance, and all I get is, we'll pray for you and please send us some money. And I thought, you know, why send you money? But then I came down to Arizona and went to churches and started getting in and hearing different things at other churches and meeting the right people. And that makes all the difference in the world. And then I've been an elder in 3 churches down here. Right now I just I'm a member, but it's just something that, again, I still have a lot of questions, but there are other people I meet that know a lot more about it than I do, and they help, you know, answer my questions. Well, Jim, you said you can't think of it that particular way. You can't think of it, you know, like I sometimes think that the other day in church we were talking about certain specific things, and I was thinking, you know, if you're a believer, you're a follower of Christ, God, you shouldn't have all these other problems that you have. Why doesn't God just say, welcome home, and you aren't going to run into any of this stuff, and yet you still do it, and you think, why should I have the same problem as Joe down the street, and Joe doesn't believe anything? But, you know, you say, well, God's giving you an opportunity of free will and find out what you're doing. But I guess I always used to think that if I were God, this is the way I'd do it. But then one person told me one day, they said, there's only one God, Jim. All you got to know is about religion is there's only one God and it's not you. So that pretty much freaked me out. But
You don't have any great-grandchildren yet, but someday your descendants will see this. And years from now, what kind of message do you want them to know about these times and about yourself, and what you'd like them to be able to think about?
Well, I mean, I think we're very fortunate to be able to live. You know, every generation keeps moving on and stuff, but I think as individual, I mean, you can't wait for somebody else to do something for you. You got to be willing to take the gamble. You got to be willing, and if you don't want to do a particular thing, you don't do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a multi-millionaire to be a success, but I really think that if you turn yourself over to the Lord and just say, that's the way I'm going to be, and I believe this, and you can't. I mean, I don't like it when I see somebody that doesn't believe in stuff, but I can't force them to do that. They have individual choice, and I met some people that are very friendly and very nice people, and they don't have no religious belief at all. But you know, I don't despise them, but basically, I think things are going to be a lot tougher in the future than they are now. I mean, the situation is that in the world, if it doesn't get its handle on a little bit, because you see, it just seems that there's such a drive for individualism as far as I want to get everything I can get. And it just, you see, well, younger people basically, and I know there's a lot of, you know, top-notch people, but it just seems like the idea is, well, what's in it for me, you know? And I got into a lot of things. I never given any thought about what I was going to get out of it. You know, you just try to help people out and things of this sort. It didn't bother me whether they're going to get any money out of it or what. If I could do something to help somebody, I did it. But I know today, and I know that's not true of everybody. I met some wonderful people, but it just seems like I was watching a TV program the other night. I don't normally watch, but it was about Las Vegas, and it said they had 21 places in Las Vegas, and they start out with rank number 21 and went down to rank number 1. And the further they got closer to 1, the less clothes they had on. At all these places, I mean, it's unbelievable. And you think that, you know, it's just all that stuff. If you read about in the past where they used to do that, you know, and have all that stuff, and I thought, holy crap, you know, wine, women, and song, and drinking, and thousands of dollars. One place to lay in, I can't think of this guy's name now, that one of the guys that he had his own plane, big plane, and he handled everything, and he was, I
Wayne Newton?
No, not Wayne Newton. This was another fellow that was, he had his own big group of women and everything else. I can't think of his name, but anyway, they showed a place for him. If you wanted to sleep in his bed, it cost $35,000. And that was up at Las Vegas. You know, and then they were talking about, well, you know, you come in and you have drinks, and they were drinking and running around. Holy Christ! I mean, I'm not a prude, but give me a break. You know, give me a break. I mean, you think that you look back. Sometimes people look back and they see something like that, and they think, boy, that was. I mean, I'm not a prude, but I'm not gonna. That's stupid behavior. But I think every person's got to be responsible for themselves. And, you know, if they don't want to be, then they got a problem that they're going to have to pay the price.
One last word that you might say to a great-great-grandchild who might be looking at this in the 22nd century?
I would say that, well, you try to get a goal in life that you can and work towards that. And it may be that you have to sidestep a little bit and stuff, but if you keep your nose to the grindstone, things ought to work out, and you know, you make your own life. But you can pick a bad way if you want to. Be prepared for it. I mean, you know, you have your only self to blame. You can't count on somebody else to do things for you. That doesn't happen. Nobody's ever given me anything. I've had to work for everything I had, and you know, I think that's. And I'm 80. I never ever thought I'd ever live to be 80. In fact, my dad was about 76 when he died, and my brother 75, and my other sister 50, and my grandfather was about 82 or 83, and I'm 80, and I didn't think I'd ever make 80. You know, and I thought, well, I'll be ready. I used to think, if I get to be 80, I'll be ready to go. And I thought that way till I was 79, and then I had a different thought, but you know, I think good things lie ahead. And that's the way you got to be thinking all the time.
So you celebrated your 60th wedding anniversary last fall?
Last fall, we're in our 61st year, and if you'd asked me years ago I'd get married, how long I'd be married for one woman, I would have said, you gotta be kidding me. But when I see people sometimes, I remember when I coming from one of my mission trips, and I came back and I met somebody that I knew at the airport and stuff, and they talked to me and stuff, and they said, well, how long have you been married, Jim? And I said, well, I've been married 54 years at that time. And they said, to the same woman? And I said, of course. But Sandra's, I couldn't have gotten a better woman than Sandra for me, because she's been top notch all the way, and she's smart, and she's overly ambitious, really. I mean, she needs to learn to take it a little bit easy, but you know, I owe a lot that I am because of her. Because I mean, I'm not a real easy person to live with, but she's top of the line, so I got to give her credit a lot. And that's another thing I'd say: you get the right woman, you know, it makes a difference. Or if you're a woman, you get the right man, because it's not that you're going to agree all the time. Because you're both individuals, but basically, if you have love and respect for each other, you know, that comes first. And I know that's been with Mom and I like 61 years this year. We're in the 61st year, if you can believe that. Man, and it's really flown by, but she's been with me every step of the way. Goes with me. And never hesitates. She's ready to go. So I owe an awful lot to her. So just want to make sure that everybody knows that.